Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're in October, the spooky month, and all this month, I'm reviewing Universal Mummy movies. We started the first week of this month with The Mummy, 1932, with Boris Karloff. And then we went into the Kharis saga, replacing the Mummy Imhotep with the Mummy Kharis. 4 films. We've touched on the first 2, which are really kind of a part 1 and part 2 to a story. Now we're going to see what they have figured out for the third part of this saga, The Mummy's Ghost, starring, well, we'll get to the stars in just a moment, but let's jump in. Now, there will be some spoilers in this one. Oh, there we go. Beware of spoilers, because we're going to be talking about the whole movie, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about how it holds up with the others, and, well, you know the drill. So let's get into this. So we're talking here about a Universal picture, The Mummy's Ghost, that says 1943. I thought it was 1944. Unless my eyes are deceiving me. Officially 1944, but 1943? Maybe. With John Carradine, Robert Lowry, Ramsey Ames, Barton McLean, George Zucco, and Lon Chaney. So let's talk a little bit about the cast here. John Carradine, he actually gets top billing here in a way, but the little and Lon Chaney, that always is kind of like, but he's special. But John Carradine, tons of movies, tons of TV. The man was an actor who loved to act. He was in a lot of movies, a lot of shows that were not, frankly, very good, but he didn't care. And he always did something with that role. He always, brought a certain pride and ability to it. And he's going to be our head bad guy for this movie. Robert Lowry is playing Tom Hervey. He is our hero for this picture. Ramsey Ames is playing Amina Mansouri. She will be, well, the focus ultimately of Kharis and of Yusuf Bey, of their machinations. Now, apparently her role was supposed to go to Aquanetta, who maybe most famously was in those like Ape Woman movies, kind of odd films. But apparently she suffered an injury when they started filming, couldn't make the movies. And maybe that worked out in her favor. Maybe not. Barton McLean playing Inspector Walgreen. I guess a lot of people probably know him from I Dream of Jeannie. He was one of the base commanders at one point, one of the generals. George Zucco is reprising his role as Andoheb, the High Priest. Now, we saw him in the first movie as a relatively young man, just taking on the mantle of High Priest, of the Priest of Archon, although I don't think they had that name for them at that point. I might be wrong. I don't think they did. In The Mummy's Hand, no, I'm sorry, that's in The Mummy's Hand. In The Mummy's Tomb, set 30 years later, he is a very old man. This is maybe set a year or two later after that film. So he's also playing a very old man. In this one, of course, Lon Chaney Jr. is playing our mummy. These were some of his first roles when he re-signed with Universal. And I don't know, odd roles to give somebody who can act, because the mummy doesn't get to do a whole lot. He gets to do a little. Screenplay, Griffin J., Henry Suker, Brenda Weisberg. Original story, Griffin J. and Henry Suker. And here we go. We'll round out these things. Notice gowns by Vera West. She did a lot of the gowns for the women in these movies. They're always these sort of flowing white, kind of a gothic romance look to them, which is kind of interesting for mummy movies, but it works. Jack Pierce doing the makeup. Another good job here. Associate producer Ben Pivar, and directed by Reginald Leborg. Resistance is futile. Okay, so Opening shots tell us that we are either in Egypt or a really impressive miniature golf course. And we once again return to the temple tomb where the priests of Archon hang out. Now, this is actually a shot from the mummy's hand. That's really George Zucco, climbing those steps. But here it's going to technically be John Carradine as Yusuf Bey. So Yusuf Bey is going to be the next high priest. He's going to take over the whole Kharis thing because they've lost their mummy and apparently have lost Ananka as well. She's in the Scripps Museum. Kharis was destroyed, apparently, in a fire in the last movie. So he's the new guy, and I'll be honest with you, he's kind of wasted in this movie a little bit. He doesn't get the lines that he could be given. But so here he's getting, he could have done more acting. He could have leaned into it more. And I think been a more effective villain because, again, Kharis is like the muscle, but these guys are sort of the brains. They can show a little more emotion than he can under all the makeup. I think they could have done more with the character, but here he's getting the instructions from Andoheb about what he needs to do, and they're gonna relate the history of Ananka and Kharis, and we've already seen that before. Look, it kind of helps pad a little space in the movies, which these movies are only about an hour long, but they do all have a bit of padding, especially this one. So the movies are set, again, 30 years or so after the discovery of Ananka's tomb. So they do their little scene. It's not too long in this one. They don't overdo it. And we flash now to Professor Matthew Norman, played by Frank Riker, who explains to his students that Princess Ananka's body has been brought to the U.S. of A. And it's going to be in the Scripps Museum. And he sort of continues the tale now of the previous movies, with Kharis appearing in Mapleton and killing the people who had discovered him and Ananka. And in the classroom, we get our first glimpse of the hero, and that's the guy in the lower part of the screen there. This is Tom Hervey, played by Robert Lowry. Definitely a meddling kid, no doubt about that. So he's in the class, and he's obviously like an archaeology student, or probably an archaeology student. So he goes on and he explains more about, yes, there really was a mummy. We really saw it walking. I don't know if everybody in the class is really that convinced. And in fact, this girl, who is not our main heroine, but this girl says, yeah, I think that this is probably all a bunch of bunk. And Norman tells her, he says, no, I saw it with my own eyes. The mummy walked. And now he explains the use of the Tana leaves, which are very important for the Kharis series. 3 Tana leaves keeps the mummy alive. 9 Tana leaves means the mummy can walk and do what he needs to do. And we did learn in the mummy's hand more than that, and the mummy becomes essentially invulnerable. So you don't want him getting more than that. So Tom and his buddy take a walk to the library, and they're chatting about his girlfriend, Amina, who is Egyptian. And I'm sure that has nothing to do with the plot. And now we meet Amina. Amina's working in the library and actually looking after Tom's dog, Peanut. Peanut is an important character in this film. You'll see as we go on. So she's been looking after his dog, working in the library, and he notices this book that she's been reading, The Ancient Tombs of Egypt. And at mentioning that, the violin player that's just off camera starts playing this really ominous music, and she gets this really ominous look. She doesn't like it when the subject turns to Egypt. Gets kind of nervous about the whole thing. And she starts to feel a little bit faint. Perhaps there's another soul swimming around in her body. The angle of reincarnation, which we got in the original Mummy, has really not been touched upon in the two previous Kharis movies. It was the walking mummy, but Ananka was a mummy. She was entombed, and that was kind of it. So this is the first time now into the Kharis saga they're bringing in the idea of reincarnation. And so we now go back to Egypt, and where we discover from Andoheb that Kharis was, in fact, not destroyed in the fire. How was he not destroyed? I don't know. But he wasn't destroyed in the first fire either. So fire, apparently really annoying to mummies, does not destroy them. And he says, your task, go to America, bring Kharis and Ananka back to Egypt. And if I'm being honest, well, I mean, yeah, they were stolen. I mean, I guess the Egyptian government would have agreed, but still. It's just like, again, like I said, you go and dig up a grave that's like 5 years old and take the body, and you're in a lot of trouble. Go dig up a body from 3,000 years ago. Have at it. Don't worry about it. That's fine. And on this, Yusef swears to the old gods. And I swear that most of Yusef's lines in this movie are going to be him praying to Amun-Ra for one thing or another, which is why I say I think he was capable, frankly, of more. But I will say this, having some really good character actors like Zucco, like Carradine, does help elevate these films, does make them a little better than they otherwise would be. So he gets the lesson in the Tanati. And Andoheb says, whomever he finds with the liquid, Kharis will kill. Faster, mummy, kill. And this bodes poorly for Professor Norman, because Professor Norman is doing some work with Tana leaves, and he believes he's discovered something very important relating to a number. And his wife shows up, and she's like, oh, stop messing with this stuff. Please come to bed. And, with a sexy looking guy like Norman, you can't really blame her. But he's like, no, I'm on the brink of something. You go to bed. I'll be up when I'm done. But I got this experiment that I have to do. So, left alone messing with ancient Egyptian stuff, dude's probably in trouble. So he starts mixing up the Tanati, and the fumes bellow out. Enter Kharis. Kharis detects the fumes of the Tana. Now, we're sort of breaking the lore a little bit here. He was not destroyed, apparently, in the fire. Okay, good enough. But he's supposed to get the Tana treatment, at least the 3 leaves, every night of the full moon. The 9 make him capable of walking. So, why is he walking? Nobody's been there to give him Tana. Did he find a source of his own? The corner store happened to have some Tana tea, or maybe he found out Lipton, it doesn't work quite as well, but it's close. At any rate, he smells it. He smells it, and he's heading for the Tana. I'm sorry, I'm a juvenile. What can I tell you? And Amina sleeps peacefully for now. And this is the mummy that I really like. He just walks right through this fence. He is this force in nature, extremely strong, kind of invulnerable. And I like that. I think that's what you need to really focus on with this sort of mummy. It's kind of the zombie concept of just unrelenting. Nothing can, almost nothing can stop them. It's kind of like your, Michael Myers in Halloween. So that's good. I like that. And we haven't gotten to see as much of that as I would have liked in this series. I think they needed to lean a lot more into that, and they would have had some better films. So as the mummy walks, his shadow passes over Amina. And they did this in The Mummy's Tomb a bit, with his shadow passing over people. But when this happens, she rises from her bed and sort of moves in a trance. Meanwhile, Kharis gets to Professor Norman's house and enters. And Professor Norman is about as thrilled with this as you would expect. And it goes about the way you would expect. And this is when we first get a good look at Lon Chaney in the mummy makeup, nicely staged. I like that shot a lot. The one eye open, that hand reaching out. That's a great shot. I really like that. And the makeup's really good. And so he goes for the Tana and he drinks it. So he's vital right now. Old Kharis, I don't know why he was vital before. It's a little mistake in the lore, perhaps. So Amina has walked in a trance to the professor's house. I suppose she probably lives near campus and he's probably on campus or near it. So it's probably not that long of a walk. And when she sees Kharis leaving the professor's house, she's startled and she faints. And when she falls to the ground, we discover this strange mark on her hand, which could just mean she was stamped at like a Chuck E. Cheese, but I don't think it does. The next morning, news spreads about what happened. Professor Norman has been murdered, and Amina was found unconscious on the scene. So old men are deployed to hold their knees and also to study the corpse, which they identify as being strangled, and they also note the presence of mold and declare the mummy. And so they're questioning Amina about what happened. And of course, she doesn't have any idea what happened. She was in a trance. She doesn't have any memory of how she got there. But you notice she now has this white streak in her hair. Now, when I first watched the movie, I kind of interpreted that as shock, the result of shock. And I don't think it was. As we learn later in the film, I believe it shows that she's beginning to age. But you don't really see that in the face or anything. So that was something that was kind of confusing to me the first time around. So Joe then storms in and, knowing absolutely nothing about what's going on, declares her to be completely innocent. God bless you, Joe. And, she's holding his hand. They're clearly a couple here. And Tom, when he's talking to her, is startled to see the streak of white in her hair, which she clearly does not know is there. And I'm trying to think if we actually see her react to it later. I don't know that we do. So the next day in the news, we learned that weather forced many radio programs to be cut from the air. Oh, we also learned that the mummy is believed to be back in New England. Mapleton Monster, thought destroyed, is blamed for new atrocity. Townspeople warned to stay indoors at night, etc. And I kind of like the fact that we're not going to completely have to go over the mystery aspect of what could be doing this. I don't know. Could there be a mummy? No, it's impossible. We're not going to go real heavy into that. They've dealt with the mummy now. They know it exists. Many of them have seen it. They're sort of prepared for this thing. And while townsfolk are all abuzz about this, Yusef Bey is in town, and he looks on, and he's pleased. So we get another full moon. And Yusef Bey is out in the woods, preparing the Tana mixture, praying to the old gods to deliver Kharis to him in the hills. So we pretty well know that Kharis has been kind of in hiding since the last film, came out of hiding when he smelled the Tana that the professor was mixing up. So he smells the Tana solution and starts moving towards Yusef Bey. Meanwhile, our loving couple is out in the woods in their car with Peanut and, do a little bit of little necking. A little heavy petting. And while they're doing that, Kharis's shadow moves over them. Or is it Kharis's shadow? Well, Peanut starts barking, and it actually turns out to be old Ben, who's been out, he's making his way home in the dark. I don't know what he's been out doing. Probably nothing any good, the old rascal. And so he kind of interrupts them, and they kind of like, okay, well, good. Now, see you later. And Ben's like, oh, not going to get to watch? Okay. So they drive off, and we spot Kharis, who's heading for the Tana, and he seems to take just the most direct route. And this is taking him by old Ben's house, technically his barn there. The dog's barking at him, and we all start worrying about the dog. And the dog alerts old Ben when he gets home, so he grabs a shotgun, and he's going to go in and find out what is going on. And entering, well, doesn't go too well for him, and old Ben does not survive the encounter. His wife rushes out and crying over him the whole 9 yards. The dog actually in the background doesn't really look like all that upset. He's not the finest dog actor that one could buy. He's kind of like, oh, hey, whatever. Where's the sausages? So the police get out there, and the woman noticed that somebody had exited the barn, Kool-Aid Man style. And so the police inspect it and come to the conclusion that, in fact, it was the mummy. And the mummy also left prints for them to follow. So they come out and they start combing the countryside. And finally, Kharis arrives at the clearing where Yusuf Bey is. He drinks the potion and he's led away by Yusuf Bey. I guess because he has, the fez and the medallion combo, that Kharis doesn't just straight up murder him like he normally does. So we now visit the Scripps Museum, which, I was always led to believe that was maybe in New York, I think, from the mummy's hand. Maybe not. I don't know. At any rate, a tour is being led through Princess Ananka's, funerary stuff and all that. And when the crowd moves on, Yusuf Bey hangs about studying Princess Ananka's remains and asking the gods of Egypt to forgive them for allowing, non-believers to view her body. It was a terrible, terrible thing. And so after the watchman locks up that night, he's sort of hiding. He's a real ninja, that guy. He's hiding between these mummy cases. And so he's got a plan. And while he comes out of hiding, Kharis arrives at the museum. And, that's one of the problems with having supernatural strength is people always want you to help them move. So meanwhile, the watchman's gone down in the basement, which is really the perfect vantage point for watching the museum. And he's reading an old detective magazine and listening to this bloody old radio show, which is, pretty awesome, to be honest with you. And up above, Yusuf Bey begins a ceremony. And Kharis arrives during this and carefully closes the door behind him, which I thought was kind of funny, since he's also walking through walls and fences. He was very delicate. And Yusuf Bey tells him, the sarcophagus holds the body of Ananka. This is his love from 3,000 years ago. And it's kind of a touching little tender scene. And kudos to Chaney for being able to pull it off in full mummy makeup and garb. But as he touches the body, Amina wakes up screaming. And the body of Ananka disappears, turns to dust. And Kharis goes berserk. And Yusuf is completely confused, like he doesn't know what's happened. And then it occurs to him, Amun-Ra has willed her soul into a new body. So is Amina a reincarnation of her? Or was she just the handiest, nearest, attractive Egyptian to receive this soul? One would think there was already a tie because of the hair streak and all that, and the mummy's shadow and her in the trance. Maybe. Hard to say. So Kharis starts just destroying everything around him, which I guess if you can't get drunk, then wholesale destruction is your best bet. And this brings the watchman up from the basement. He's got a gun. Kharis gets the drop on our watchman, who shoots at him with, of course, no effect. And that's pretty much the end for the watchman. Back in Mapleton, Amina is being comforted. She says that she had this feeling that something was in the room with her, clutching her. But of course it's dismissed. Oh, it's just a bad dream. But we know better. So Tom, the next morning, shows up at the sheriff's office, and he wants to know if Amina can leave town. He wants to get her out of there, all this weird stuff happening. And the sheriff is like, no, there's too much we don't know. She better stay in town. Back at the museum, the inspectors there are they're looking at all the clues, and they think this seems to be linked to the mummy from Mapleton. And it would make sense. It's an Egyptian display, etc. And a new character now enters, Dr. Ayad. He is an Egyptologist. He's also Egyptian. He's an expert on the subject. And he explains to them the curse of Ananka, which is basically that she must lie in her tomb undisturbed, because if she is freed from her resting place, her soul may attain purchase in the body of another. And Walgreen thinks this is just a bunch of applesauce, so he quits the police force and starts a pharmacy. No. And Ayad is like kind of freaked out because he's going like, how else could we explain the body not being there? Because he explains to them, look, the bandages, the wrappings are intact. The body was not removed from the wrappings, which would be a weird thing to do anyways. It's just like it's disappeared. So he thinks that that's what's happened. So Walgreen goes to Mapleton, and he goes to question folks at Norman's house and finds out what Norman was doing and the experiment he was doing. And Ayad is like, the Tana leaves, and he gets all that. And so Walgreen actually gets a really clever idea. Why don't we restage what happened with the Tana leaves? And maybe that will draw the mummy out of hiding. And his other plan is, we're going to dig this pit that the mummy could fall into. He won't be able to climb out of it easily, because he's kind of aware we can't really fight a mummy, So we'll dig this pit. That's actually a really good plan. So kudos to Inspector Walgreen. We cut to Amina and Tom sitting on the porch talking, and talking about what had happened to her. And Tom says, look, we're going to New York tomorrow. We're getting married. And she's kind of hesitant about this. Is this the soul of Ananka beginning to take control? Or is it just because Tom's kind of a dork? Hard to say. And they let her landlady know what their plans are. And she says, I'll keep the doors, the windows locked. Nobody's going to come in. And Peanut's going to be the guard dog. He's going to leave Peanut there to look after her. And if mummies are destroyed by the power of cute, Kharis is in serious trouble. Meanwhile, Yusuf Bey is using the power of prayer, which is primarily what Carradine does in this. And he prays to know the location of Ananka. And as he does, the shutters blow open and light floods into their little hideout. And he tells Kharis, follow the light. The light of Amun-Ra will lead you to Ananka. So off Kharis goes. Leave it to, it's always the guy with the limp who has to go actually do everything. And we now see, I don't know if this is supposed to be like a mine or something. It's like there's tracks. It's this tall wooden building, but it's like on, stilts with, and there's ladders and these tracks going down, which is, again, perfect for a mummy. It's an odd looking location, but this is where these two are are all holed up. So meanwhile, back at Norman's, they start doing the Tana experiment with the leaves to try to bring Kharis to them. But Kharis is keyed in on Ananka's location, and he's heading that way while Amina is suffering this very fitful sleep. So I guess we're getting the struggle of the two souls right now. And this, to me, is where the movie starts to go off the rails. It's not a bad lead up to this point. It's going to really have trouble here at the end. So Peanut can sense the approach of the undead horror. He starts whining. We're all getting a little bit nervous about Peanut at this point. But while he's whining, Amina awakens in a trance. She goes outside on her own and collapses on the lawn. And Kharis picks her up. And this is kind of funny to me. Kharis has one arm always up. He can't move it. Right until he needs to carry a woman. And then it's like, oh, you big faker. You could move that arm the whole time. Just needs a good enough reason to. So this awakens the landlady, sees Kharis walking away into the woods with her, and she calls Tom. And so he says, go get help, and he rushes off to be heroic and all that good stuff. Meanwhile, at Professor Norman's, the pit has been dug. It's a 10-foot pit, very Dungeons & Dragons, while Kharis carries Amina unconscious. Notice the gown, the Vera West gown, very gothic, good stuff. Here's a slightly lightened up version so you can see it better. And the whole time, Peanut is following along. He's a very good puppy. So they're brewing the Tana leaves back at Professor Norman's. We see them boiling. Is it going to attract the mummy? But Kharis is now heading under this bridge, going back to the hideout. Peanut is following along, and Tom, we're going to see him out running around as well. Kind of running around with no idea where he's going. This is going to be a big part of the end of this film. Running around aimlessly. So the landlady arrives at Norman's and tells him that Kharis has Amina. So the whole little subplot of the Tana and the trap out the window. Didn't need to waste time with that at all. Now, it still works kind of logically, but from a movie standpoint, that's all over. So these guys are like, we got to go get him. Kharis continues carrying her through the wilderness, and this part feels very padded, and in fact, the last 20 minutes of the movie feel mostly like padding, which is unfortunate. I think they could have done better with this for sure. Tom, also walking around aimlessly, is finally found by Peanut. Now, you remember in the Mummy's Hand, how I say that Babe Jensen is kind of the hero of the show, right? Because he shoots the high priest, and then he shoots the Tana out of Kharis' hands. That's really saving the day, more so than Steve Banning did, who had just gotten knocked around by the mummy and ends up throwing fire on him while Kharis is trying to lap up his Tana. Well, Peanut is the hero of this movie, to be honest with you, because without him, Tom and the angry mob are just wandering around aimlessly for the rest of the movie, which sadly they could have just done. It really wouldn't have mattered. Kharis finally gets back to the hideout, lugs her up that ramp, and now Yusuf Bey gets his first sight of Amina. Now, the last two movies have involved the high priests getting the hots for the damsel in distress. Now, up till now, we haven't seen anything like that. But that look in his eyes, and he notices the mark on her hand, and he notices that she's very beautiful, and we notice there's a lot more gray hair. She appears to be aging rapidly. Meanwhile, there's Peanut. I know you can barely see him, but he's there, leading Tom where he needs to go. And the angry mob is now out and about, also with no idea where they're going. No idea where they're going. You think they would have split up? They didn't split up. So Yusef ties Amina down, barely. Snidely Whiplash would be very disappointed. And she's taking the whole situation rather well. Now, is this because Ananka's personality is taking over? Don't know. With the amount of padding that we had, we could have gotten a little bit more of an explanation of what's going on. Because at this point, Amina is this innocent person who's, much like Helen Grosvenor in The Mummy, innocent person who's now being, attacked by the mummy, which is fine for a damsel in distress, but hold on. And she finally sees the mummy, and that's the most reaction we get from her. There's no screaming. It's kind of like, okay. I think maybe they were going for like, she gets it. She knows who she is, or kind of knows who she is. Don't really expect much more from her for the rest of this film. So Kharis looks on as Yusef prepares to inject Amina, much as Andoheb was going to do in the mummy's hand. And now we get this moment of inner monologue. Yusef knows what he must do, but he really doesn't want to harm this beautiful girl. So it looked like we kind of maybe abandoned the whole high priest getting the hots for the damsel. Nope, we're back to a mummy love triangle. He does not want to harm the girl, and he now wants her for his own. And you now see her hair is completely white, but the face is still perfectly young. And Pierce did some amazing old age makeup earlier. They could have been aging her up a little as we went. So again, I was kind of a little bit confused when I was first watching it as to what exactly was going on. Tom is still a man outstanding in his field. The tension should be ramping up at this point. It's really starting to drag. I think the inner monologue should have happened earlier, so that as Tom and the mob close in on the hideout, there's like this emotional crisis for Yusef. What am I going to do? Am I going to, do what I'm supposed to do? Am I going to, try to keep the woman for myself? Something like that. It seems like every choice is made to get rid of any tension, from the film. And he's back to praying for strength to resist the temptation of Amina / Ananka. But the temptation turns out to be too much. And so he says with the Tana leaves, he and Amina can be young forever. But the Tana leaves have kept, they've kept Kharis undead all this time, but would they make them young? Maybe they would make them young. I don't really know. And Amina is now unconscious and will be unconscious for the rest of the movie. There's not going to be any struggling, nothing. She's just out. I'm not even sure exactly when she passed out or why she passed out. Is it the old age getting a hold of her? I don't know. And there is a lot of padding through here, and it's only an hour-long movie, really. And I have enough questions that I feel like, well, instead of padding, you could have maybe, been explaining what the hell's going on. So Yusef now says out loud, big mistake, we're not returning to Egypt. And he starts to give her the injection. This gets Kharis' attention, and he strikes. And we get a nice scene here, Kharis versus Yusef Bey. It doesn't go well for Yusef Bey. He ends up getting thrown out the window right in front of Tom, who's finally arrived. And Tom now wastes time going and checking on Yusef Bey. Why exactly would he care in particular? He's there to try to rescue Amina. So Peanut leads the charge, Tom behind him, to go confront the mummy who is now coming down the ramp. Why is he coming down the ramp exactly? I guess because he saw Tom out there. He makes pretty short work of Tom. Really wasn't the best plan in the world for Tom to try to take a mummy on all by himself. And Peanut, seeing that this isn't going so well, he rushes off to get the angry mob. So yes, the only reason Tom and the angry mob ever get to the Kharis' hideout is because of Peanut. There's no detective work, none of that kind of stuff. It's Peanut is the hero here. But keep watching. It's just not going to matter. Kharis now apparently gets the idea he's going to pick this woman up and he's going to climb down a ladder and escape, which is a terrible plan when you're a mummy who is supposed to have a bad leg and a bad arm. But he carries her on out, and damned if he doesn't do it. Nice job, Kharis. I guess he is super strong, so maybe that kind of works into it. But I think there would have been more tension if you had sort of this attempt to rescue Amina from the tower. That's very fairy tale, isn't it? And again, if we'd learned more about what was happening to Amina, maybe Dr. Ayad sees, oh, she's in the grip of the curse of Ananka. She's 8. We must do something to save her. And we have this solution that will bring her back or something. And now we're going to try to get... No. No. We're not going to get anything like that. Kharis makes it down, and we get the slowest chase scene we're ever going to see for 50 years until the white Bronco. You know what I'm talking about. He heads off into the swamp with Amina. And thanks to Peanut, the rest of them discover it. They wouldn't have otherwise. They would have been standing around, literally standing around. They did run up into the tower and like, nobody's here. Oh, I don't know. What are we going to do? Peanut once again. So they start following. And now it's really hard to get good frames here. They catch up to Kharis as he's walking into the swamp with Amina. And you can see that she's getting older and older, and they're disappearing. And they disappear into the water. And that's it. And Peanut looks on. The brave little bugger, he did everything he could to save Amina's life. And that was it. And everybody just turns around and leaves. And as we get the end, we get this voiceover that says, "The fate of those who would defy the will of the ancient gods shall be a cruel and violent death." And that's all, folks. But here's the problem. How did Amina defy the will of the ancient gods? She's utterly innocent here and is taken by the mummy. Helen survives in the mummy. Amina, she's killed by Kharis. Kharis essentially wins through no fault of Amina. Wow. Like, what an ending. It's an odd ending to the film, and it's also a really boring ending to the film. It just drags. There's people running, multiple shots of people running around, not being able to find anything until Peanut shows up. And then they get there, and they ultimately do nothing once they get there. There is really no tension whatsoever, although there were opportunities for it. And the sacrifice of Amina is just sad. So where are we in the Mummy movies? The Mummy, 1932, I would give like 4 out of 5 stars to. I think it's a solid film. The Mummy's hand had some problems. A lot of padding, not enough mummy. I'd give it like 2 out of 5 stars. Low energy hero, a lot of comedy that didn't work. There was some good stuff too. The follow-up, The Mummy's Tomb, I'd go 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was pretty good. We got a lot more of the mummy. The plot made sense. Great makeup. The actors who were playing themselves as old men did a great job in it. Mummy's Ghost, I got to go like 1 out of 5 stars on this one. It has a good build-up, and then it just falls apart at the end. It just falls apart at the end. There were so many things that could have been done. Kharis getting trapped in the pit, them trying to save Amina. Maybe he escapes and brings her there. Yusuf has this big emotional thing, and then we get this big, and while they're fighting, Tom gets in there with Peanut, of course, and gets Amina back down, and Ayad is able to give her the thing to bring her back while the fire is set to the tower, and Yusuf, there's so much you could have done to have this great ending. People running around in fields. Mummy wanders away very slowly in a marsh. She gets old. They drown or they go underwater. That's it. That's the Mummy's Ghost. What do you say in the audience? Mummy's Ghost, is this one of your favorites? It was rated really highly in one book. I don't know what movie those guys were watching, but okay. What do you think of this? What do you think could be improved? What do you think was great about it anyways? Is it one of your favorites? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this review, please think about giving it a thumbs up. Likes don't cost you anything, really help me out. And if you like this review, maybe you want to subscribe to my channel. I've done a few other mummy movies. I got a whole bunch of Halloween-y type reviews you might want to tune into. There's going to be a little thing up in the corner that's going to show up. You can click that and see what those movies or those reviews are. And I do all sorts of pop culture reviews. So maybe you want to subscribe, maybe share with a friend. All that would be very groovy. Until next time. God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there, and I will see you again, hopefully soon, in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.